Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Dream, and you are here for another exciting episode of Psychedelics as Medicine. My guest today is a guest who's been on, I've had the opportunity to interview once before. I was very excited when we realized together that he made me aware that his background would lend itself to the Psychedelics as Medicine podcast also. His name is Roland Pankewich. He refers to himself as a bioenergetic health practitioner. Big umbrella on that one. Roland, welcome to Psychedelics as Medicine, part of the It's All Good show. I'm very happy to have you here today.
Dr. Dream, as always, I enjoy when I get to speak to you, my friend. Thank you for having me on, and it's good to be doing this again, although slightly differently from the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get started, give us, I like bioenergetic health practitioner. I may start using it for myself. But give us all a little bit of background on who you are. You have such a depth of experiences and perspectives and everything. I think it would be helpful to know a little bit more about you before we dive in.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to do so because telling the story helps me understand better what it is I do, let alone other people. Putting yourself in a box of a label is always challenging because words are such a limitation in our realities in terms of the subjective meaning and the description. But why I say bioenergetic is I tried to help people with their health on a multitude of fronts, from everything physical to non-physical, from dense material-based reality to energetic beyond the third dimensional. What I mean by that is I started by studying movement and exercise, which interested me in nutrition, biochemistry, which then interested me in functional medicine and lab diagnostics and understanding deep biochemical patterns. And when that wasn't enough, it was bioenergetic medicine in the form of German biological medicine, homotoxicology. But in there, I got my exposure to psychedelics as well, which is part of the umbrella because they are tools. People call them drugs and they're so misguided. They're tools, they're molecules, and as you describe them, they're medicine. They are part of the bigger picture in working on the transpersonal self, that which is beyond your physical 3D identity. So it's given me a very wide cast net of knowledge, experience, and understanding in all that at least I can perceive to be the human experience, because wherever we're struggling in life, we experience struggles through the physical and the psychological, emotional, but they're always all connected. And all of them are spiritual crises, I believe. And these psychedelic tools, I think, are very powerful catalysts for people along the way or along the journey of the development of the self to understand more of who you are and break free of the shackles of who you are not. So that's why I say bioenergetic practitioner. Wherever someone is on their journey, I would like to have some degree of knowledge, understanding, and skill to meet them where they are. And if I can help take them deeper as a guide or a catalyst, will they continue their journey? That's the role I play when I work with people one on one.
Excellent. I think that gives us a good overview. Now, I've had a lot of fun with the psychedelics as medicine, and I'm not as young as I look, but I've had decades, literally over 4 decades of experience with psychedelics. And in the beginning, it was very much focused as kind of a recreational thing, and then after about 5 or 6 years of looking at it from that perspective, it became part of. I brought ritual into it, and intention, and mindfulness, and it's really taken off from there. Back in the day, I wouldn't tell people about all of my psychedelic experiences because people weren't as open as they are now. There's so many studies now coming out about psilocybin and MDMA and other psychedelics that are treating PTSD and depression and everything else. So I think people are just starting to get open to it, that it's more than a drug. And I don't even use the D word when I talk about these. It's always tools or medicines. And you and I were just speaking beforehand. I do have another podcast called the DMT Chronicles, and you were speaking about ayahuasca. DMT Chronicles is about NN-DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and ayahuasca and other forms. But you were saying it's people kind of think that maybe it's one size fits all. I'm paraphrasing, of course, and that not everything is for everyone. And so let's kind of start off there a little bit, because there's so much out there. It's becoming more and more available. We're reading about it more and more. I recently, in the last year or so, have been reading about studies where people that have had strokes have benefited greatly from DMT. And I thought, oh, isn't that crazy? I had back-to-back strokes in 2020. Had I known, I would have gone right to DMT. But it is, give us kind of your take on all of this, what's happening. And I'm sure you've got a very good perspective on things.
I'd like to think I have at least a useful perspective, because they say experience is the mother of all teachers, right? So how psychedelics fell into my world, I mean, other than trying mushrooms in high school, like I think everyone does, not knowing what the heck they're doing. Like I grew up with a father who's a police officer. So any substance in my household, and he would find all the crap that I'd bring home when I was a kid somehow. All those things had a very negative stigma around them. But as you get older, you start to realize the things you're transferred as belief sets from people who are either authoritative or informed as you see it in your reality are actually opinion. So someone who talks about something that they've never tried, it's actually useless information for the average person. But we're indoctrinated by those things until we somewhat become self-aware to question, well, do I really feel this way about my relationship with something like a psilocybin or an LSD or a DMT? They are not drugs. I agree with you. That to me, a drug is something that doesn't move the needle of consciousness forward all that much. Cocaine, heroin, things that put you closer to death in the third dimension than anything else. I've always used the word molecules for psychedelics only because A, it takes away the stigma, and B, it alludes to something else, because I believe that the molecules of these psychedelics are just a way of, you know, all that is the great spirit that communicates with us in human form via a different way, via a dimensional shift experience. So, to echo what you said there, I agree entirely. Psychedelic molecules are wonderful things, but they come with a specific reality of responsibility with them. What I mean by that is you can't just take a bunch of stuff and not expect your world to get upended or uprooted potentially. After my first ayahuasca experience, I went through my first divorce, my only divorce. And it was so apparent to me that the path I was on was so disintegrated with who I was to become that when I tried to integrate back into my reality, I wasn't allowed. What I mean by I wasn't allowed, I literally have memories of lying in bed, having these horrible visions of fighting with my ex-wife and us breaking up and me going my own way. And that happened unrelentingly until I actually got out of my marriage. Now, in hindsight, I understand why that had to happen for me, but the responsibility of having to go through that experience and the deeper responsibility of knowing that you chose that path for yourself without a say in it after the fact is, I think, something that should be mentioned to people. Because if you start to invest in the world of deep psychological examination through the experience of psychedelics, your life will change. And if you can be on the path of acceptance, kind of like, you're in a boat, you're on a river, you don't have oars, and you're kind of rolling with it, you can surrender to the process and it always turns out for the best. However, To get there, you might have to go through some very challenging human-based experiences of unlayering the emotional gunk that's stuck in your field that I believe psychedelics can shake loose. And the reason I'm saying this is if someone doesn't have the resolve to do that, if someone doesn't know that that's what they're signing up for, and if they're not ready to change how they see everything and relate to everything in their reality as they knew it, it's probably not something you should jump into just because you saw it on a podcast or just because your friend did it and all of a sudden, oh, well, they did it. I want to do it too. I believe there's a calling and it shows up in your life, even when you don't ask for it, in such a synchronous way that it's almost like you have to follow it. It's like, Alice in Wonderland, so to speak. So that's kind of the whole set of those things. And I will say that in a more zoomed out perspective of reality, because it's becoming so popular in collective consciousness, if it weren't meant to be something that was here, it wouldn't be here. And I believe that there is a shift happening on the planet. There is a rising of consciousness, or at least there's the request for people to follow along with the elevation of consciousness on a mass scale. And I believe when used appropriately with the right intention, guided by the right people in whatever frequency or combination or duration relates appropriately to you, the person, they can be a very wonderful fast track of expanding yourself.
I love all of what you just said. Now, you have served as a facilitator with different medicines or psychedelic molecules for people. Speak to us a little bit about that and how that works, and maybe some of the results that those people received from that experience, from those experiences.
I will, and I've often thought about this, and I've spoken about it in little bits and pieces here to people, but I don't think I've ever really sat down and tried to put it together cohesively. So I appreciate you asking me this, because it challenges me to do something that I've never done before, and I really have the desire to articulately communicate this. So I've guided people on a multitude of what I call pharmawaska experiences. It was a process that a mentor of mine created where he can essentially dose DMT in capsule form with liver inhibition using a pharmaceutical. I've also done MDMA energy therapy sessions, and I've also done some psilocybin guided sessions with people as well. The experiences that I've seen with everyone is everyone does have a transformative experience. And the thing that I think is the most fundamental relationship that I've observed at play there is the battle of ego self versus that which is beyond ego self inside of the person's individual expression of consciousness. We're all little pieces of spirit in embodied form. We're spirit consciousness concentrated to soul embodied in this physical third dimensional reality. That's how I think this thing works, at least right now. And we're given body consciousness, we're given mind, and we're given higher self intuition. Let's just put it into three categorical elements of who we are. The lowest vibration is body consciousness or ego self, right? The symbolic self. That's what we think we are. And it's a collection of stories and experiences that consistently reaffirm our sense of reality as to who we are. Oh, my name is Roland. I was born in Canada. These are my parents. These are my hobbies. This is my profession. It's describing a character. And the vast majority of society walks around that way because I don't think they know otherwise. They believe they are the body. They believe they are the sum of all their stories, which is why so many people get so emotionally triggered and symbolically upset when someone does something that challenges their notion of reality. It's really why people get upset. It's you've done something that either invalidates someone's perspective, that challenges the notion of what someone defines as important, or it makes their journey and their reality compromised in some way, shape, or form externally. You follow so far?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is what that person is going to have to come up against in a psychedelic experience. It's the degree to which the molecules and the change in energy force them to examine that part of themselves and how tightly wound and how well constructed the energetic structures of that person are versus how open are they to see everything in a different reality to allow a new version of themselves and maybe a more evolved or a more healed version of themselves come through the experience and after the experience with integration. So I've seen everything from someone get stuck on a loop of having to pee every 10 minutes for 3 hours. It was like an ego trap of them trying to control their own experience. I've seen someone laugh hysterically and be in their own little world where they have not been able to communicate and interact with anyone else. I've seen people lay perfectly still and I had to check for a pulse for 3 hours because they were in some deep depth of working through something internally. And I've had to wrestle someone for 3 hours because they were so opposed to relaxing in their journey that they kicked holes in walls and they bit me and they punched me. And that was their experience of going through a psychedelic challenge. And there is no way it should be, air quotes. There is no consistent pattern. The only thing is everyone who goes through it and comes out of it, it's unlike anything they've ever experienced before in their waking reality, unless they've become incredibly adept at maybe breath work, uh, meditation, transcendental meditation, guidance, things of that nature. But with that, you still have some degree of ability to influence your state. Whereas the psychedelic, as soon as it hits your neurochemistry, you're there. So I've seen a multitude of things in terms of the experiences and even the aftermath. People who have absolutely beautiful positive outcomes, people who go through months of challenge, people who initially regretted doing so, but then changed their mind like a year or two later. So it's a very nuanced and individual world, just as we all are that, because how many permutations of consciousness can express in human form? However many humans decide to embody in a lifetime, right?
Love it. It is. I've had a variety of guests on the show. One of my friends was the in the group of first licensed facilitators for psilocybin in the state of Oregon. We had a gentleman that does ketamine therapy from Prescott, Arizona. Um, and all sorts of really wild stories of what the process has been like. The most recent interview I did for the DMT Chronicles is a couple in Denver, Colorado, doing extended state DMT, where you're hooked up to an IV, and the experience lasts as long as you want it to, but like up to 4 or 5 hours. And they can bring you up, take you down, just kind of the whole thing. What's common across the board in all of these conversations is the focus on and value of integration.
Mhm.
And that's something that in the recreational use scene is deeply missing, and people are going and they're having these peak experiences, but then they don't have anyone assisting or guiding them when they get back with the integration. I remember years ago, I was at an ethnobotany conference with uh, Terrence McKenna, Jonathan Ott, Ralph Metzner, Christian Ratch, Stacy Schaefer, and whatnot. And I was very much experimenting with DMT at the time. And I remember a conversation with Terrence and I didn't have anyone that was guiding me or holding space or anything like that. I was just kind of out there on my own with it. This was 1994, 95. And I had a conversation with Terrence McKenna, and I didn't record it or anything. And I was actually under the influence of some medicines at the time that I had the conversation with him. So, but I recall that one of my big questions for him was, Terrence, how do you do this, having these peak DMT experiences and then coming back to this what becomes very much like ordinary reality as opposed to where you've been? And so all the people that I've talked to since that time that I have on the podcast talk about integration. So speak to us a little bit about what does that exactly mean, and how has that played out with the experiences you facilitated for people?
That's a great question because the notion of integration is still not even understood. Like, what's happening? Like, what is really happening to the being on all levels? Like, what is the physiology change? What is the psychology change? What is the relationship with emotion and spirit? How have those things all shifted? And I think that's why it's such a complicated thing to do to standardize because truly, and I'm a believer in everything's bespoke, like there's some commonalities across the board. You're not going to tell someone, yeah, just go start eating junk food and go drink on the weekends and don't move your body. Get the fundamental things of what all humans need to be healthy and ground yourself. But there's really getting context on the person and what it is they've experienced to help them, and I'm going to use the air quotes again, make sense of the coming together of two worlds. I think that this is what I've looked at. So when I guide people, I might just back up to go part into the previous question and then connect the dots. When I guide people, I also do some work on them. And I have this ability to use the currency of feel to get a sense of what's going on beyond just watching the person with my physical eyes. For example, I was guiding someone with a friend of mine in Phoenix, Scottsdale specifically, and she's an incredible shaman where she's studied with indigenous people in South America. So she asked me to co-facilitate. And I remember the person who was under the influence, he had this like very tight body posture and he was like shaking his head and he was very tense. And I felt that he was kind of like becoming a black hole for all the energy in the room. He was dominating the experience around the room because when you take a substance, I believe it shifts your field, the configuration of how energy moves in you, everything shifts because it has to, right? You're
Of course.
bringing in a molecular substance that has a vibration that's molecular substance plus your vibration equals new outcome. And I remember that I just started slowly guiding open his heart area. And then all of a sudden he took this massive inhalation and he went, oh, and she looked at me and I looked at her and went like, oh, thank God, because you just felt this suffering and the pain he was going through in the room. And I think that's what happens with people in a way where integration becomes challenging. So on a physiologic level, you rewire how the energy, the photons, and everything are moving in your body so aggressively and acutely in a journey. And there's some permanence of shift afterwards that makes you feel different. Like I know what my reality felt like beforehand, and I know what I feel like, but I don't quite feel the same, and I can't put my finger on it. That's something that has to be explained to people because it's part of the responsibility of what you've chosen. You may have some physiologic shifts. You talk about someone with having a stroke rather, and after that they had somewhat of an improved overall neurological function. Well, makes perfect sense. You're probably rewiring millions of connections in the brain. So the brain's creating workarounds. I have a friend who was a combat controller of the US military in the Air Force, and he was medically retired because of head trauma, but he's really helped work around some of the post-trauma compromise of how his brain and his thought processes were not able to work with the use of DMT. He was kind of like you. He was just going on his own journeys and he'd figure it out. So I think people have to understand that there's going to be a physical change and there's going to be an energetic change. So the subtle body, the energy body is going to be different. And the energy body, in at least my belief, condenses and contracts down into how the physical body presents itself. So, they may have digestive issues that clear up. They may have old body pains that go away, or they may start getting headaches, or they may start getting body tensions because something is in process. And that may take weeks, if not months, in order to settle. And to the point that you made about asking Terrence, well, how do you come back to this normal reality? I think people become so enamored by the psychedelic reality that they want that to be their default. They want to live there, they want to be there, and they almost reject this third dimensional reality as lower vibe or more of like a punishment, a sentence. It's boring here. I'm limited by the laws of this container. It's like, well, but that's the point. You chose to come here. You have to know that before you go into an experience. because the opportunity is to shift things to bring it back here to make you fall in love with this reality even more. It's not that you're going there to distance yourself from this reality to try to become an ethereal being living in a physical body. You have to integrate your experiences and your teachings and also commit to the path of working through the afterburn of integration because emotions may have to run through you. You may spontaneously be brushing your teeth and start crying. Why? I don't know. It could just be a vibration that's ready to move out. Or you may have to change some of your relationships in your life because you now see the people who are energy takers, versus those who are here to build you up. Or you may have a hobby that you loved and you identified with and you have no interest in it anymore. Oh, I used to love, I'm a car guy. There was a year where I couldn't, yeah, I wanted to sell every car that I bought. I wanted to not go to car racing anymore. I wanted to run away from it because my ego was convincing me that that was low vibe, that was too earthbound and too domesticated. And you go through that journey because if you're not careful without proper integration, your ego self can co-opt spirituality and you can create a very vicious spiritual ego that's a blind spot to you because it will make you think you're holier than thou and you're elevated beyond all other people because you've had direct transmission of sorts. When in reality, it's the integration that stops that from happening and connects the dots from the journey and the why you took the journey to what's going to happen and take place in your life in the aftermath.
I think that's well put. One of my favorite examples in my own experience of integration was 1994. Went down to Peru with a group of 18 people to spend 2 weeks deep in the jungle doing ayahuasca with the shaman Don Augustine. And over that 2 week period, we did 4 group experiences. I turned 30 down there, so I did a fifth one on my 30th birthday. But we would have the experience in an open air temple. We're all wearing, mosquito netting because it's so fierce down there, and we've got our bucket to get sick in and everything like that. They call it a televisor because a lot of times you see your visions. That's Spanish for television. You see your visions in the bucket of your own
Your
stuff.
own
But
vomit.
what I really liked was the next day, we would all get together and sit with Don Augustine, and he didn't speak English, so there was a translator there, and we would share what our experience was, and he would take us through some of the symbolism and help us connect the dots with the experience. And I found that to be really amazing. And that was my first, like real experience of integration, was going through that. And then jump ahead years later, I was a big fan of Burning Man. But one of the things that I saw with Burning Man was people were living 51 weeks a year preparing for how they could be authentic for that 1 week a year that they were going to be out at Burning Man. And I just thought, wow, that's, I don't want to be that person. And I actually had to stop going because in my presentations and workshops out there, I was starting to sound like a broken record of, you're having this experience. Yes, it's wildly expansive. Maybe the medicines are involved, maybe just the environment and the freedom and the difference of this reality is having an impact on you. But it's up to you to like take that back to the hive, to take that back. And for me, that whole process led to Dr. Dream. And then at a certain point, I stopped going to Burning Man because I realized that wasn't just apply a name or a persona for that 1 week a year out there. I was Dr. Dream everywhere at all times. And while the experience itself, and there were, quite a bit of psychedelic medicines involved out there, except for the 1 year I went and asked for all the downloads and did no medicines. And that's when the whole Dr. Tree. Anyway, long story there, but what I was able to do was to take that back, and so now in my psychedelic experiences, I'm able to identify the impact, the realizations, the whatever you want to call it, that it's having on me, and then integrate that into who I choose to be in this life, in this reality. And I commented the other day in a podcast that um, out of the hundreds of psychedelic medicine experiences that I've had over the years, um, they've all been positive. That doesn't mean that they've all been without challenges, but that by and large, I come back more empowered, more in myself, more understanding of who I am and what I'm capable of than before the experience. And so it's been kind of an amazing process for me. And at the same time, I understand it's really not for everybody. And for me, it's I've had a lot of people recently, well, in the DMT podcast, talk about how they came back and they gave up alcohol. They came back from the experience and had no desire for meth or cocaine or other hard drugs that they were addicted to prior to the experience. That whatever was shown to them in the experience, whatever they had visions of, or whatever it did for them, they came back and they were different people and really embraced that. I talked to one person who came back and immediately stopped eating meat and became a vegetarian and everything like that. And so it's fascinating how it works for people, and then how they go through it. We're Stephanie and I, my wife and I, are huge fans of the festival circuit, and we haven't gone to as many in the last couple of years as we normally do, but it's not uncommon for us in the past to go to 4 or 5 festivals a year, and at this point we kind of pick and choose. Next year we're going to 2 festivals, and one of them is in Iceland, and it's a total solar eclipse event. 3,333 people all gathering in Iceland for this amazing experience. And I'm in a group of people that are planning. I don't want to go to these festivals anymore just to go to a festival. I want to, if I'm not, signed up to give a workshop or something, like I presented an idea for a workshop in Iceland called The Sacred Trinity: Psychedelics, the Quantum Field, and the Art of Manifesting Your Reality. It didn't get picked up, but they said, listen, we've got a group of people that are coming together and we want your input and this and that. So we do every other week Zoom calls or something like that. And one of the things that we're talking about is, it's a festival, it's a total solar eclipse festival. At that, people will be on a lot of medicines. And so we're talking about how to set up these stations to assist them. One of my ideas in this was to have a time each day that revolves around the concept of letting go and releasing, and then a time each day that revolves around the integration of, this is what I'm choosing to manifest, and the direction forward from here. Because then, in my experience, those are the 2 things. You're either embracing some aspect of the experience that's opened up for you and you see possibility, or it's like, wow, this has shown up for me and I'm wanting to let go and release. And I think that these are super important aspects of, even outside of the psychedelic medicine realm of life, to give people those opportunities to process and move those energies and support them in that. Now, it leads me to a question. You're talking about how we're talking about how things are becoming more mainstream, and we're, the media and everything. And so where people didn't really hear that much about ketamine 10 years ago, or something like that. And now there's these ketamine centers popping up all over the country, and states have legalized psilocybin, some states to a certain extent, and the Colorado personal use law that allows, this extended DMT experience. Um, so it's being put in front of people. How does someone who's not really well versed in all of this decide what may serve them? Maybe they realize that they've been an alcoholic for 5 years, and maybe this could be the key. How do they go through the process of identifying what might be right for them now that there's so many options available?
You know, that's a question. I don't have the absolute answer, but I have some frameworks of ideas or at least some insights that may be useful to people because the notion of anything becoming popular and mass adoption changes the opportunities for the quality of the experience and also the authenticity and the intention and the integrity of the experience, i.e., is someone doing this to make money as a shaman, or are they doing this because they feel it's their life purpose to be of service to humanity through one's, gifts and processes? What I've determined is that the base fundamentals of that question, which is probably the most simple yet difficult thing that I could say as an answer to people, is you have to know if this calls to you first and foremost. Like, is it an actual inner calling, or is it something that sounds like it's a good idea, or did you hear that so and so got benefit from it? So now all of a sudden you're thinking about it, but you have no inner feeling towards it. I think if there's a true calling or there a true synchronicity that shows up in your life, which is probably a very hard thing for people who are very compromised to tap into, if you're able to start there, above all else, no one can tell you more about you and your life than you. Right. So that's the first thing that I want to say as a preface. Um, and the reason I say that is I've seen people go through journeys who really wanted to do it versus those who did it because of the pressures of other people pushing it on them or they push it on themselves. And those people have had a harder time afterwards because I don't think their soul was as ready. That's the first thing. The second thing, the wonderful tool of microdosing has been created. You do a sub-maximal dose, usually it's of psilocybin or LSD or whatever. There's no better way to decide if you want to go in the deep end of a swimming pool than putting your feet on the stairs. Do I want to jump in the water? Is it the appropriate temperature for me? Do I feel like I can swim today? So microdosing is a great way to start becoming familiar because I think a lot of what people come up against is whatever deep stigmas that they unconsciously hold around things that they've been given. If you don't clear those up, you're in a battle with yourself. There's like a sense of guilt or wrongdoing, taking something that your parents told you when you were age 12 to never do again. Just because something happened to you 30 years ago, it doesn't mean that the emotional effects are still not able to influence your brain. And you could go into a journey with incredible guilt. And what is that going to do for you? If your intention is to work through a substance abuse addiction, well, the first journey may actually make you face your own guilt about doing this. So it didn't do what you wanted it to do. So sometimes the separation of expectation and the outcome of what you're actually going to get, because you can't preload a psychedelic experience. You can't, you can't put a quarter in the machine and spin the dial and get the exact experience that you want. That would be the second thing. The third thing I would say is don't attach on to anyone else's stories and experiences. What your best friend gets, if they got bliss and ecstasy, you may get pain and suffering. Or the opposite is true, right? Because if you attach onto an expectation or an idea, that's an attempt to control something. To me, the goal of a psychedelic experience is to surrender all aspects of control and know what you have signed up for. You're not going to jump out of a roller coaster in the middle of a drop saying, this is enough for me, I'm out. It's going to end very badly for you. And the metaphor there is, the analogy rather, is you are going to suffer more the more you try to control things. So that's the first three things I would say. Is there a calling? If you're curious, maybe start small and figure out if there's something of a resistance in you. And don't look to justify your position or try to make yourself feel better about the unknown by attaching onto someone else's story. That would be the third thing, because that's a disservice to you. That's not your path. It's not your journey. And then beyond that, You would have to figure out, are you going to go the way of a more regulated, accredited process, like you mentioned, these facilities that are popping up. The wonderful thing about those is through the power of legislature, you have the ability to have standards of processes, the purity of the substance, the quantity, the dosing, the protocols, probably very, very sound and well-rounded. The only challenge in that regard is if someone is more on the medical side and you want a lineage, you want the wisdom of a shaman, you want someone who doesn't use medical terms, someone who does not have a vein, but rather says, no, you have to go through the journey as it's been done for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Well, then again, you're getting a more sterilized experience. You're going to get something, but if you're wanting that journey, you're going to have to figure out where you want to go, the people who are calling to you, the substance that it is that you feel called to do, and researching or figuring out through well-regarded connections. Like I'm sure someone like yourself would have a much better knowledge of pointing someone in the direction of where to investigate rather than saying, well, you can Google this and maybe it comes up with something. Maybe it might be a nightmare. And then the only other thing I would say is there are certain places that have these retreats, they're destination places, they're extremely expensive, and the experience is very luxurious. It's lavish. And I've spoken to people who go to these places, and I've heard bad stories sometimes. I've heard stories of poor execution of the actual experience. I've heard stories of, oh, there was one shaman and like 40 of us, and there wasn't anyone who could help me in my experience. I've heard even more insidious stuff about people being, inappropriately touched after. Like there's been things where there are some, like, let's not get it twisted here. There's dark stuff that infiltrates this space because people are at their most vulnerable. And there are pretty, pardon my language, fucked up people in this world who want to prey upon people at their most vulnerable because that's their MO. And this world, as it becomes more popular, the opportunity is to invite more light and more dark in. So you really have to either get a read on someone or something, or through knowing someone who's gone there, not to attach onto their experience of what they experienced in the journey, but to know that, yes, I felt comfortable there. I felt safe. It was well regarded. Multiple people have given me good, credible outcomes from going there. I would say that would be a this worldly thing, a third dimensional thing you have to tap into. Is it somewhere I feel comfortable? Will I be safe? Will I have support? Can someone get a hold of me, or can I get a hold of someone if I need to? And then you have to decide: do you want the more legislative, controlled experience, or do you want the more bespoke shamanic experience to where it's not going to be you walk into a clinic, you have your hour and a half appointment, then you walk out and you go home. You might have to be somewhere for a while and work through some stuff in a foreign environment. But I'm always more drawn to that because I like that aspect of the journey. I like the unknown, and I like that which I can't prepare for because I find there's so much more growth in that.
Yeah, it does bring up a lot of differences. I know that my first ayahuasca experience down in Peru in the jungle, small group of us, tight knit. We had gone through some processes together beforehand, and then we were just isolated, and it wasn't luxurious at all. I mean, this was back in 94 before these, bougie ayahuasca retreats
Yeah.
came about. And, we were all in one giant space. Each of us had our own mattress and mosquito net over and everything like that. It was exceptional, and I loved it. But then I was invited. I was back in New York City, and I was invited to a ayahuasca journey by traveling shaman facilitators from Brazil, from the Santa Daime. And this is sort of a Portuguese Christian version of the experience. And I went upstate New York, didn't like it at all. The Portuguese Christian music and everything was, it just didn't work for me at all. And then I lived out in California. I was invited to Ojai, California, sort of a spiritual area. I was living in Ventura, and they were doing ayahuasca journeys there, and they were having like 40 or more people. And I said to the person that was putting it together, I said, I'm not really about being in a room with 40 people and a shaman doing this. He said, well, we've got some really high profile people that come from Hollywood and this and that. And we got them in a separate room if you want to be in the room with them. And I just flat turned it down. My wife would love to do ayahuasca. And I've said to her, we want to do it. You know, we'll go down to the jungle in Peru. We have contacts, we know people, and we'll do it that way. I really have no desire to do that in the United States. It just felt to me like a different energetic and not one that I was interested in. And so, you know, and then along the way, people find out that we are well versed in our own experiences in the psychedelic realm. And we've been asked as sound healing practitioners to facilitate experiences for people that are doing mushroom journeys and stuff like this. And we've said no across the board. You know, that's not what we do. That's not the experience we're looking to facilitate. And nor is it the responsibility we want to take on. But I know that in this reality where people are just, you know, all of a sudden an expert, you know, in whatever it is, deemed by themselves to be an expert in everything else, that there are some facilitators out there that are not doing it in the right way or for the right reasons. And so it's really good to, you know, have an understanding of all the different aspects of it once available, and talking to, there's plenty of us out here that can give good insights that then someone can use to make their own decision. Now, I have to ask if it's comfortable for you to talk about which of the medicines have had the most profound effect on you, and any insights from those particular ones you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, happily. The one that I've taken to the deepest realms of experience by far is DMT. I'm most well versed in that through the combination of doing an inhalation process and also the modified ayahuasca one where you dose it in capsules and take it. Like the longest experience I had there was probably over 6 hours, 7 hours of third dimensional time. Um, the quantity of time where I felt like I experienced in there, it's unknowable. Yeah, you just can't relate it. But it's interesting that each time I went deeper and deeper into the ayahuasca experience, there was always a theme for me. And the theme was that of almost, it was known that I came for instruction. It was known that I came to learn. So there were some themes that were always there. Like one was the ability to change my ability to use perspective in my conscious third dimensional reality, bring that back here. A game that was once played with me was I had all of the senses, right? Sight, sound, touch, taste, hearing, feeling rather, and they were all separated. Then all of a sudden they were merged into one. And I had to be able to figure out where they were relative to each other. And then the game would they would start spinning and it would speed up. And the more I tried to control, the more it would spin. And I felt incredibly sick in this experience. Then when I learned to surrender and let go, it taught me I didn't have to force so hard to figure things out. I should just sit back and allow things to become visible to me. And that happened multiple times in the same experience. I'd always go through the same entry point to the tunnel. And then there was the teacher. It always had a feminine energy to it. And it was, oh, you want to learn? Okay, here we go. And it was just going through these different dimensional experiences, going through one, falling through another over and over and over again. And that was after the first time was like a nice little, oh, look what you can do with your reality. You can hop into this place and influence the outcome. You can hop into that place and influence the outcome. It was a beautiful lull into, oh my goodness, this is all it is. It's beautiful. And then every other journey afterwards until I had my last big journey where I got to the point where I was just asking questions and I just kept hearing the same voice. It's up to you. It's up to you. No matter what I wanted to know the answer. And what kept coming back to me was, no, no, you're not getting it. Whatever you ask is up to you. The question, the answer, it's all you. And then you might sit there and think, well, what good does that do you? How do you go to the grocery store? How do you don't get it? All of consciousness is you. You collapse the waves into existence that you perceive because sight and sound are nothing more than interacting waves of energy that are intaken by the physiology, processed by your brain, and projected out as a picture that you see through your eyes, or a sound that you essentially interface with, and your brain interprets the percussion of wave force energy of noise and translates it into, oh, that's the sound of a car horn. That's the sound of my wife talking. So you start to get those deeper understandings of what seems to be more of a fabric of this third dimensional reality, which I don't believe at all is what we call base reality. It's just the container by which all of the rules of physics in the third dimensional reality exist. You start to interface with that more. And I think that helps you be the conscious creator of your own reality and become more comfortable in manifestation. You know, for me, that notion of it's up to you, practical takeaway from that was, well, if you want to do something in your life, most people don't accomplish things because they unconsciously talk themselves out of being able to do it. So if you just hold it in your mind, you can hold that and realize you just have to wait for your present moment of now to catch up to that reality where you're doing something. Well, anything is possible within reason. You know, I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm 40 years old almost, and I'm 6'1", so probably not going to be in the starting lineup for the Los Angeles Lakers. But if I really want to create something in this world that's within my power, I just have to wait for it to happen, knowing that I want to do it. So that was probably the most valuable experience that came out of lessons learned within DMT. And then the other things that I would say, I did a year long proper dosing protocol of microdosed LSD, and I also intermixed some psilocybin in there. And I got two things from that that are very profound. I remember one time I did some psilocybin and I went to the gym of all things. And I was just standing at machine and I was looking in the mirror and I looked into my eyes and then I heard a voice go, "Oh, there you are." And it was just this awareness of I'm in this gym, I'm working out my body, other people are doing these things because it's some sort of, outcome they want for their sense of self-development. But in that moment, I was like, I saw through all of that. I was like, oh, there I am. I am the energy that inhabits this body in a way that I could never unknow it. It was like this light just came on in the room after the bulb had been flickering for a while. And I find the psilocybin is a wonderful journey inwards. It's like becoming so much more adept at understanding how the inner world is put together and the mirror effect of the inner world's reality projected outside of you as to what you experience. LSD, on the other hand, sharpened my ability to see through things in a way of mechanistic, energetic structures of reality coming together. You know, you talk to someone and all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, this person's trying to game you. Oh, this person is lying about something. Oh, this person is struggling. And you start to see beyond them. You don't just hear the stories they're telling you, you see the nature of everything that comes together. It's almost like you have, remember in elementary school when there was the projector, they put those clear paper, clear plastic pieces pieces of plastic on the projector, and they draw on the projector, and all of a sudden it would be projected on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have this base drawing, and then people would add to it. That's the best way I can describe that because you'd see the person in front of you talking to you. And if you'd never done this, you would just be listening to their story. Then all of a sudden, what the LSD seemed to do was, oh, this sound is going on over there. You can take in so much more information. Your perspective is so expansive that you're able to see a deeper reality. But the caveat is no one outside of you can validate that reality for you. So it forces you to become very, very strong and well versed in making your calls of what it is you know to be in front of you, rather than just asking other people, "Do you see this too? Do you think that's happening?" So I would say those are the three most powerful things. Ketamine was interesting. Ketamine, I used to try, and I would literally lie on the couch, and I would my consciousness, I'd shoot it up out of my body. I'd go around and do stuff, and I'd come back down. And after a while, I just didn't resonate with ketamine anymore because it's like, what, this doesn't feel like it's meant to enmesh with me at all. I experienced it, I tried it, it was what it was. But it wasn't something that I really explored beyond just a few experiences. I would say other than that, the breakthrough. I've done DMT in an EE system before. That was fun. And I remember I did it, and all of a sudden there was just something in my periphery. I wasn't able to look and see because every time I turned, it would turn. And at first I had this like, what? And then this energy just started tuning me up. It was like it went through everything. It was like, oh, here's some rust we got to buff out, and here's some tension we got to work through. And I just remember going, oh, thank you for the tune up. So there's, unique aspects of experience there, but even as I hear myself tell these stories, they're very interesting stories to people potentially, but they're also nothing at the same time because that's what happened to me with me. Your experience may be entirely different, and there have been some challenges in interfacing with people who knew me before the experiences began because they hold you in their minds as to how they've always seen you and how they've always known you. And you said it best, I was Dr. Dream all the time. So when you have that notion of stepping into the new role of the character that you've chosen to play in your life, it may not interface well with other people who know you well or have known you well because they can't understand the change and accept the change. So it's slightly tangential to the question that you asked, but I would say that through all of those experiences of what I've tried and experimented with, the outcomes have been incredible. There's been some serious integration that's been required, taking old energies out of me, redefining relationships with old family and friends and things that I did in this world. And sometimes, you're in a dark place for a while until you move through it. Sometimes you go through periods of being so deeply connected to what feels like all of consciousness. But when you can find that middle way where you can allow yourself to feel and express your emotions and honor them, but not become overwhelmed by them, but also not float so far away that you can't go to the grocery store anymore because you can't be bothered to write a shopping list because you can't have to do everything intuitively now. It's in that middle way that I think the magic exists.
I appreciate you sharing those different stories, and also that insight that what our individual experience is really only meaningful to us because it's us. It's coming from us, no matter what our perspective is of where these medicines take us. It's still deeply rooted in who we are, and therefore, if I could say, what we need. Um,
Hang
and
on. And
so
just to
it's
add to that, if I
yeah.
may, just because you sparked something in me, if I want to describe the ethos of where the benefits come from, and it's not in a megalomaniac way, but if you can tease out through whatever experience and symbolism that are shown to you, there's no one more powerful in your life than you. Like it's all you. Even the medicine is you. It's consciousness in a specific frequency that's condensed into an experiential solid reality of taking a liquid or inhaling something, but like it's all you. You're the one who scripted the experience. You are the experience itself, and all the insights are hopefully bringing you back to you to where you don't need to continue looking outside of yourself to find the answers to the questions that you have, because there is no greater authority for what is correct for your life than you. Someone could know more. Like, you're going to take your car to a mechanic rather than just grab a wrench and like, I think I'm going to try to take this engine apart. But you have to know that you create the mechanic, right? You go there. They're your consciousness presenting itself in front of you. So the psychedelics are tools to teach you about how much power you have to shift yourself in your own life.
And this that you touched on right here is near and dear to me. The it's all you. It's I find a tremendous sense of empowerment in the experiences that I've had and what the insights that I gather from them. And that to me is everything, because we live in crazy times would be an understatement, and lots of no, you can't do this, no, this isn't possible, that da 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 da, depending on who you surround yourself with, and how you react to input from outside of yourself, it can uh, really affect what you do, what you try, what your belief is in yourself and in your own ability to create a reality for yourself. And yeah, it's that for me is a big one. My recent explorations with DMT have come back to that over and over again. Is you've got this. I mean, I'm working on some big projects right now, and so part of my consciousness when I go there is, oh, maybe I can get some insights on this. And I
Mhm.
literally I call them the others in the DMT realm, and whatever that
Yep.
relates to. But it's like, oh, and they're like, we've been waiting for you, and I'm like, great, here I am. and and
Hey,
and
what do you
then
have to
they'll
tell me?
right, exactly, and they'll show me this model of something that I'm looking at, and from my consciousness I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And they're like, oh, this is how reality is created. This, and there's like the inner workings of a watch but on a huge scale, and I'm just like, wow,
Yep.
that's amazing. And I'm just like, I have no idea what that means. And then I come back and I'm moving projects ahead in a way, or coming up with ideas to move forward that some people in my reality are like, yeah, not going to happen. And I'm like, whatever, then you just go over there, stand, watch me do this, And so
Mhm.
going into the realm of like kind of anything's possible and bringing that back is for me one of the incredible experiences. Last year I spent 11 and a half months on the road. It didn't lend itself to a lot of exploration with the medicines. And now we're based here in at our home in Idaho, and one medicine or another, my wife and I have a medicine journey one night a week. And it's just sometimes it's super intense and sometimes it's just a very mellow sort of thing. We don't drink alcohol, we don't use any marijuana products, no edibles, nothing, no cigarettes, we cut out sugar, all this is our time to take a break from everything else, and we're guided on what that consists of that week and how we're going to approach it. And it's kind of our wild psychedelic date night. Some people are going out to the movies or going bowling or whatever, and we're setting up a very comfortable space, intentional, to explore and connect, outside of everything else. And it's incredibly powerful, and has created some amazing shifts for us. But again, not for everybody. Some people, it's like, no, you just keep going out bowling. That's probably more your speed at this point, and this
Yep.
and that. But I find that it's almost like going to church once a week, for some people, and it's you
Mhm.
know getting filled up from that space, and just kind of gives me insights and grist for the mill, as it were, things to work on, and process through, and everything else. And so that's really why I have this podcast, Psychedelics is Medicine, and the DMT Chronicles, is to further explore that space with other psychonauts and other experts in the field, to and put it out there to give people some other point of reference. And I've had so many people say, "Oh, aren't you worried about putting this out there publicly?" And I guess I'm just at a place in my life where I'm like, no, I don't give an F. Like if
Yeah, I
this
don't
is
give a shit. Really
it,
don't.
it's like the purple beard. I mean, if you have an issue with it, yeah, this is probably time for you to walk away from me, because I'm just going to get more bizarre underneath the purple beard. And so it may not be for you, and that's fine. I'm not everybody's flavor, and I'm not here to be. And so, same thing with all of this. Is there, as we're kind of nearing the close of this, is there anything we haven't touched on, or anything else you want to put out there that you feel would be of value, or do you want to hold on to it and wait for the next time we have a conversation? How would you like this ending part to go right now, Roland?
I'll touch on one thing very briefly that you just inspired in me when you said you're on the road for 11 and a half months, so it didn't lead you much time to journeying. I think that's something that people who plan to use this regularly in some sort of lifestyle fashion, there are times to do and there are times to not do, probably. There are times to be more expansive and go in, and there are times to do your taxes and cut the lawn. So I think it's wise to understand that there's probably an individual cadence that people should have. Alan Watts has an old one with psychedelics. Once you got the message, hang up the phone. For some people, it might be a couple years of experience, and then they just feel like, yeah, I got what I needed from it. For others, it's, yeah, I'm going to keep going. And then when I'm told to stop, I'll stop. A buddy of mine was told, like, don't come back here for a while. The last time I went on an NDMT experience, I was by myself and I only had one of those little pens. So I was trying to figure out how can I just break through, because at some point, you can't operate. So what I figured out was if I could wedge my arm at a certain angle, I could just keep going until I forgot that I had an arm. And that's what happened. And I broke through to the other side. And the others, as you call them, I remember hearing all these excited, oh, look, he's doing it. He's figuring out. And then they started talking about all the things that I had done, but it was way too fast for my memory to actually hold on to. But they were basically, to paraphrase, in their summation, I was figuring out the mechanistic aspects of how all things work, which is what I believe that my self-stated purpose was before coming here. Like, I like understanding models and fitting things together and finding ways to create this massive amount of information that cohesively connects, and then that'll probably be my journey in body. But it was going so quick that the only thing I remember, and I know that the EMT has a sense of humor because this, it was like, now forget everything. And they just shot me back. I woke up like, oh. So, but why I bring that up is it's been since then that I've really gone on an experience, because I felt like, okay, cool. I just know that I'm on track. And the only thing I've done here and there is what I call these little tune-ups where I'll, if there's a personal challenge in my life or something that I've tried to work through in meditation or contemplation, and I feel like I've hit a bit of a wall, I find psilocybin just does such a good job of opening up that space. But again, don't use these things as crutches. I have a friend who he says his brother is going back on another journey, and he just keeps going back because he thinks the next thing he's going to reveal is in that experience. I believe that the fits and starts, the red lights and the green lights of these things with time in between is really where you get the ultimate benefit, because bringing it back here and not using it as an escape mechanism or a weekend recreational alternative to drinking and blowing lines of coke or whatever people do. I'm like you. I don't foray into other worlds. I can't. Cannabis and me never related well. Everyone would be having fun laughing. I'd be sitting in the corner with an anxiety attack trying to figure out how the universe works. But I think that that would be the only other thing I want to add, is respect for the process. If you don't respect the process, the process won't respect you. And I think what that looks like in your life is creating more challenge for yourself because of ignorance rather than understanding. So that's probably my only piece of information that I'd want to add before we sign off.
I like that. I appreciate that. It's that, the self awareness, know who you are and the why of what you're doing, whatever it is you're doing, and then go from there. Roland, this has been an exceptionally wonderful conversation for me to have. I do so enjoy your company, your perspective, and I will look forward to the next time. Thank you so much for joining us. The It's All Good show, Psychedelics is Medicine. It is an honor to have this experience with you.
Likewise, Dr. Jean, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure.